At Thanksgiving dinner, while everyone else was laughing and reaching for second helpings of turkey and mashed potatoes, my sister's daughter Lily grabbed the gift I had wrapped so carefully. For our mother smashed it against the edge of the table until the paper ripped and then threw it to the floor. The room went silent for a heartbeat, and I thought maybe someone would scold her. Maybe my parents would tell her to stop. Maybe my sister Vanessa would step in and correct her daughter. Instead, Lily stomped on the box with both feet, crushing it flat, while her curls bounced around her shoulders and shouted at the top of her lungs. Mom said, "You don't deserve nice things." The sound carried through the entire dining room over the clinking of glasses and the low hum of holiday chatter from the living room, louder than the football game murmuring from the TV in the background. Every eye turned toward me, and I felt my face burn even as I sat frozen in my chair. For a moment, I could not breathe. I could see my son Ethan staring at me from across the table, his fork still in his hand, his eyes wide with confusion and fear, too young to understand the full cruelty of the words, but old enough to sense that something was deeply wrong. My sister Vanessa did not flinch. She smirked, actually smirked, her red lipstick catching the warm light from the chandelier above the table. Mark, her husband, looked down at his plate, like if he ignored it, it might disappear. My parents, Aubert and Helen, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. My mother stared into her wine glass as if she could find courage there. No one moved to stop Lily. No one told her to apologize. Instead, I heard a cousin snicker softly at the far end of the table, a muffled laugh that broke whatever fragile sense of dignity I had left in that moment. The gift, the one I had saved up for weeks to buy, lay crumpled on the carpet near the hearth. A delicate silk scarf I had ordered from a small shop downtown, the kind of thing my mother used to love when she was younger, was now crushed, the fabric wrinkled, one end dipped into the cranberry sauce that had splattered when Lily smashed the box. It was ruined. But worse than the ruined gift was the feeling in my chest. I felt stripped, exposed, made into a spectacle in front of my own family. It was not just a child throwing a tantrum, it was a message. It was Vanessa speaking through her daughter. It was cruelty wrapped in the innocent voice of a 9-year-old. My mind spun. I wanted to shout, to demand who had told Lily to say those words. I wanted to ask my parents why they were just sitting there watching their younger daughter be humiliated in their own home on the holiday that was supposed to be about gratitude and family. But I said nothing. My hands trembled in my lap under the tablecloth. Ethan whispered softly, "Mom, are you okay?" I nodded at him, forcing a small smile, though my stomach was twisting and my throat was dry. Vanessa reached for her wine and raised the glass, her eyes never leaving mine, as if daring me to react, as if enjoying every second of my silence. I realized then that this was planned. Lily had been coached. No 9-year-old comes up with a line like that on her own. The way she looked at me after she said it, the triumphant gleam in her eyes, told me she believed she had just performed exactly what her mother wanted. And in a way, she had. I looked around the table one last time. The golden turkey sat half-carved steam still rising from the stuffing. The pumpkin pies were waiting on the counter. Candles flickered in their holders. But all I felt was cold, a chill running from my scalp down to the pit of my stomach. They were all complicit. Their silence was as loud as Lily's scream. It told me I was alone here. Slowly, I pushed back my chair. The sound of the legs scraping against the hardwood floor made everyone look up startled, as if they had forgotten I was still present. I smoothed my dress with hands that would not stop shaking, and placed my napkin gently on the table beside my plate. Ethan started to rise too, but I motioned for him to stay seated until I came around to him. I bent down, whispered that we were leaving, and helped him slide off his chair. He clutched my hand tightly, sensing my resolve. No one stopped me. Not one word came from Vanessa, from Mark, from my parents. They all just watched as I walked out of the dining room. Ethan at my side, my heels clicking against the wood like a metronome, counting down to something final. I did not raise my voice. I did not plead or explain. I simply walked out into the cold November air, the scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon pies fading behind me, replaced by the crisp sting of night. That silence, that terrible silence, followed me to the car, and in it, I understood something that would change everything. They had ruined Thanksgiving, but more than that, they had revealed themselves. And once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. My name is Rachel Morgan. I am 32 years old, divorced, and raising my 6-year-old son, Ethan, on my own in Columbus, Ohio. I never imagined that this would be the version of adulthood I carried into my 30s, but life rarely follows the plans we sketch when we are young. I work as a mid-level accountant at a manufacturing company, a job that is steady but not glamorous. Numbers make sense to me. Spreadsheets behave. Budgets can be balanced if you pay attention. People, on the other hand, are far less predictable. Growing up, I thought my family would be my foundation, the one place I could count on to stay solid. My sister Vanessa and I were born only 3 years apart, but we might as well have been raised in different households. She was the golden child, the one with perfect hair and endless confidence, the one my parents always praised for her charm. I was the quiet one, the bookish girl who never caused trouble, but also never seemed to shine bright enough. Even as adults, those roles stuck. At holidays, the spotlight somehow always landed on Vanessa and her accomplishments, her expensive outfits, her dramatic stories about vacations and parties. My successes were brushed off as ordinary, even when I was the one paying my bills on time, raising a child alone, and keeping my small household afloat without anyone's help. After my divorce 3 years ago, I had hoped my family would rally around me, that they would see how hard I was fighting to create a stable home for Ethan. Instead, I became the silent shadow at the table, the one everyone tolerated but no one defended. Thanksgiving had always been complicated for us. My parents, Robert and Helen, hosted in the old house they had lived in since before I was born, a place full of memories both warm and bitter. The dining room still smelled faintly of the cedar wood polish my mother used every Saturday, and the long table still wore the same tablecloth embroidered by my grandmother decades ago. Yet every year, the comfort of tradition was laced with tension. Vanessa would arrive late, trailing perfume and shopping bags, and my parents would light up as if a celebrity had entered the room. When I walked in earlier with Ethan carrying homemade pumpkin bread, the greeting was polite but subdued. My father barely looked up from carving the turkey. My mother hugged Ethan warmly, but then drifted back to fussing over the silverware. That was the rhythm of our family. Vanessa commanded attention without asking, and I blended into the wallpaper even when I longed to be seen. Still, I kept showing up year after year because I wanted Ethan to know his grandparents, to have cousins, to feel like he belonged to something larger than just the two of us. I wanted to believe that family meant safety, that love was stronger than rivalry. Tonight proved me wrong. As I stood in that dining room with the gift crushed under Lily's shoes and Vanessa smirking behind her glass of wine, I realized the truth. The roles we were locked into as children had hardened into something poisonous. I was still the scapegoat, the sister who could be mocked without consequence, the daughter whose pain could be ignored. The difference now was that Ethan was old enough to witness it, and that fact cut deeper than any insult. He was watching the people he called family treat his mother like an enemy. My instinct as a mother flared. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the ugliness that had shaped me for years. That moment at the Thanksgiving table was not just about me anymore. It was about the message he would carry forward. I could not let him think this was normal, that cruelty and silence were acceptable parts of love. My name is Rachel Morgan. I am 32 years old, and for the first time, I understood that surviving in this family meant more than biting my tongue. It meant drawing lines I had never dared to draw before. When people ask about my childhood, I usually smile and say it was ordinary. We grew up in a quiet suburb outside Columbus. My father, Robert, worked as a civil engineer. My mother, Helen, stayed home until we were older, then picked up part-time work at a library. On the surface, we looked like the picture of stability. But inside our house, there was always a line drawn between my sister and me, one that grew sharper with each passing year. Vanessa was born 3 years before me, and from the very beginning, she wore the crown of the golden child. She had thick blonde hair that curled naturally bright eyes and a personality that filled every room. Teachers loved her. Neighbors adored her. My parents bragged about her grades, her sports, her friends. When Vanessa sang at school concerts, my mother wept with pride. When she won a small art contest, my father framed the ribbon and hung it in the hallway. I was the quiet one. I liked books more than people puzzles more than performances. My report cards were solid but not dazzling. I never broke rules, never caused a scene, never gave my parents reason to worry. But instead of appreciating that, they treated it like it made me invisible. Vanessa was the sun and I was the shadow she cast. I remember once in middle school I had worked for weeks on a science fair project. I built a model of the solar system, carefully painting each planet with tiny details. When I brought it home, excited to show them, my father nodded distractedly while scanning Vanessa's latest report on her soccer scores. My mother said it was nice, but then turned to help Vanessa pick out a dress for the dance. That moment stuck with me. It was not about the planets. It was about the feeling of standing there holding something I was proud of and realizing no one cared. That dynamic followed us into adulthood. When Vanessa struggled in college, my parents rallied. My father dipped into his retirement to help pay her tuition. My mother spent hours editing her essays. Meanwhile, when I chose accounting as a major, a field I knew could give me security, the only response I got was, "Well, at least you will always have a job. No pride, no joy, just practicality." After graduation, Vanessa bounced from one opportunity to the next, chasing jobs that sounded glamorous but rarely lasted. She married Mark quickly, a man who seemed charming at first, but soon revealed himself as another version of her, someone who valued appearances over substance. They lived in a stylish condo, drove expensive cars, and talked endlessly about travel plans. But what no one outside knew was that their finances were a mess. Behind the designer handbags and Instagram vacations, there were overdue bills, maxed out credit cards, and whispered arguments about money. That is where I entered the picture. The quiet one, the reliable one, the sister they could count on to clean up the mess. It started small. A loan here, a few $100s there. Vanessa called me late one night crying that they might lose their car. She begged, said it was just a temporary setback, that she would pay me back. I wired the money without hesitation. Months later, she asked for help with Lily's preschool tuition. She said it would break Lily's heart to lose her spot. Again, I stepped in. I told myself I was doing it for my niece, not for Vanessa. That was how it began. Soon it became routine. Every month, Vanessa or Mark would reach out with another crisis, and every month I would scrape together what I could. I never told my parents. I never told anyone. I convinced myself it was what family did. That loyalty meant sacrifice. But over time, the resentment grew. Each time I opened my banking app and saw my balance dip lower, I felt the weight of their entitlement pressing down on me. They never thanked me. They never offered to repay even a portion. Instead, they acted as though it was my duty, and my parents, though they did not know the details, still reinforced the imbalance. When Vanessa bragged about a new purse or a weekend getaway, my mother would beam with admiration. When I mentioned Ethan's milestones, like how he had learned to ride his bike or read his first book, my father would nod politely and change the subject. Their silence was its own betrayal. It told me I was not worth celebrating, that I existed to serve to fill gaps, to make things easier for everyone else. That is the history I carried into this Thanksgiving. Years of giving without recognition, years of swallowing humiliation in small doses, years of telling myself it was temporary, that one day things would shift. But watching Lily smash my gift and scream words her mother had planted, I knew the roles had not changed. They had only hardened. Vanessa was still the golden child, my parents were still the silent witnesses, and I was still the disposable one. Only now Ethan was watching too, and that was something I could not ignore anymore. The dining room that evening looked like something out of a magazine spread. My mother had gone all out, as she always did for Thanksgiving. The long wooden table was covered with the old embroidered cloth from my grandmother, the same one she had pulled out every year since I was a child. Tall candles flickered in crystal holders. A centerpiece of autumn leaves and gourds sat in the middle, surrounded by polished silverware and neatly folded napkins. The turkey, golden brown and steaming, took its rightful place at the head of the table, and the smell of sage stuffing filled the air. If a stranger had walked in, they would have thought it was the picture of warmth and tradition. But beneath that polished surface, tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. Vanessa arrived late, of course. She swept through the front door 30 minutes after everyone else had been seated, trailing the scent of expensive perfume. Her heels clicked on the hardwood, her laughter echoing too loudly as she ushered Lily inside. Vanessa wore a fitted dress that sparkled under the light, a deliberate display. Mark followed behind, carrying 2 bottles of wine and saying nothing. They acted as if arriving late was their privilege, as if the whole evening had been waiting for them. My parents rushed to greet them. My father clapped Mark on the shoulder. My mother kissed Vanessa's cheek with exaggerated delight. No one mentioned the lateness. No one mentioned that the rest of us had been sitting there awkwardly passing bread and making small talk. I watched as my son Ethan quietly picked at the roll on his plate, his small shoulders hunched, already sensing the shift in attention. We began eating once Vanessa had settled herself into the seat beside my mother, commanding the conversation as usual. She told stories about shopping trips, about the horrible service at a luxury hotel in Chicago, about Lily's new extracurriculars that cost more than my monthly rent. My parents hung on every word, nodding and laughing. I sipped my water and listened to Ethan's small hand, occasionally brushing against mine for reassurance. Lily, meanwhile, roamed the table like she owned it. She dipped her fingers in the cranberry sauce, stuck them in her mouth, and then licked her napkin. She climbed on her chair, drummed her spoon against a glass until everyone turned to look at her. Vanessa smiled indulgently and said, "She's just spirited." My father chuckled. No one corrected her. The chaos continued. Ethan tried to focus on his plate, but I could see his eyes darting nervously to his cousin. He had been taught to be polite, to sit still, to say please and thank you. Watching Lily do the opposite unsettled him. When the time came for dessert, my mother rose from her seat and announced that she had baked 3 pumpkin pies and an apple tart. I reached under my chair, lifted the carefully wrapped box, and said softly, "Before dessert, I'd like to give you this, Mom." I had saved for weeks, skimming from my grocery budget, skipping lunches at work. I wanted to give her something that showed thought, something personal. The silk scarf was folded neatly inside a decorative box wrapped in paper with a golden ribbon. I held it out, my hands steady though my heart pounded. My mother smiled vaguely and reached toward me, but before she could touch the box, Lily darted forward like a hawk spotting prey. She snatched the package from my hands, nearly knocking over a glass of wine in the process. For a split second I thought she was just curious, that maybe she wanted to help her grandmother unwrap it. Then I saw Vanessa's eyes glint, saw the faint curve of her lips, and I knew something else was about to happen. Lily banged the box against the edge of the table. Once, twice, until the wrapping tore. The sound silenced the room. Forks clinked to plates. Conversations halted. Then, with a small, triumphant shriek, Lily threw the box to the floor. The scarf tumbled out, delicate fabric fluttering like a wounded bird before landing in the mess of spilled cranberry sauce. Gasps rippled through the table, but no one moved to stop her. Instead, Lily stomped on the box with her small patent leather shoes and shouted so loudly that my ears rang. Mom said, "You don't deserve nice things." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt them sink into my skin, into my bones. My chest tightened and I could not move. All around me, faces turned. My cousin at the far end stifled a laugh. My father pressed his lips together but said nothing. My mother adjusted her wine glass. Mark shifted uncomfortably but did not intervene, and Vanessa sat back, swirling her wine with a smirk carved across her face. It was not a child's tantrum. It was a performance orchestrated, rehearsed. Vanessa's message delivered through her daughter's mouth. Ethan froze. His fork clattered to his plate, his wide brown eyes locked on me. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling, "are you okay?" My heart broke in that instant, not for myself, but for him, for the innocence he was losing by watching how his family treated us. I forced a smile, though tears burned my eyes, and squeezed his hand under the table. Vanessa lifted her glass toward me like a mock toast, and then sipped slowly, savoring the silence that followed. No one defended me. No one told Lily to apologize. The room settled into that heavy, suffocating quiet, the kind that says everything without words. My gift lay ruined on the carpet. My dignity shredded like the wrapping paper scattered among people who would not lift a finger to protect it. I realized then that Thanksgiving was no longer about gratitude. It was about power, and I was the target. The drive home that night felt like moving through a tunnel with no end. The streetlights blurred past in streaks of yellow, the windshield wipers tapping against a mist of November drizzle. Ethan sat buckled in the back seat, unusually quiet, his little hands folded in his lap. Normally, he would chatter after family gatherings, telling me about the food he liked, or the funny things he had noticed. Tonight, he just stared out the window, his reflection pale against the glass. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. My heart was still pounding from what had happened, and my stomach churned as though the turkey and stuffing I had forced myself to eat were turning to stone inside me. The silence between us was heavier than any words. At one point, Ethan's small voice broke through. "Mom," he whispered, hesitant. "Why did Lily say that? Is it true?" I felt my throat close. I wanted to pull the car over, scoop him into my arms, and tell him everything that his aunt had always looked down on me, that his grandparents had allowed it, that his cousin had only repeated words planted by her mother. But how could I unload years of pain onto a 6-year-old? Instead, I forced calm into my voice. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "It's not true." He nodded, though I could see confusion flickering across his face, the way children sense when answers only skim the surface of the truth. He leaned his head against the seat and closed his eyes, but I knew he was not sleeping. He was thinking, processing, already learning that family could wound as much as it could comfort. When we pulled into our small driveway, the porch light cast a dim glow on the cracked steps. Our house was modest 2 bedrooms with peeling paint on the siding, but it was ours. Inside, it smelled faintly of the cinnamon candle I had lit that morning, the one that had burned down while we were gone. I helped Ethan out of his coat, tucked him into bed, and sat on the edge of his mattress while he clutched his stuffed bear. "Will we go back there tomorrow?" he asked, suddenly, his eyes wide in the dim light. "No," I whispered, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Not tomorrow. We're home now." He seemed to accept that his breathing slowing as sleep finally claimed him. I sat in the dark for a long time after listening to the quiet rhythm of his breath, my own chest aching with a mix of rage and sorrow. Back in the living room, I collapsed onto the couch. The silence of the house pressed in around me, but it was different from the silence at that dinner table. This silence was mine. It was safe. Still, the scene replayed in my head on a loop, Lily's voice shouting Vanessa's smirk, the silence of my parents. I realized it was not just humiliation I had endured, it was a revelation. Nothing would change if I stayed quiet. Tonight had shown me that silence was not protection. It was surrender, and I was done surrendering. After Ethan fell asleep, I sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I opened my laptop not to distract myself with television or music, but to stare at the banking app I had checked almost every day for the past 3 years. Each line of numbers told a story no one in my family knew, a story I had carried alone. A story that now felt like the missing piece, explaining why the humiliation at dinner cut so deeply. I had been paying for Vanessa's life. It began 3 years ago, not long after my divorce. Vanessa called one night, her voice low and urgent. Mark had lost his job, she said, and they were behind on their car loan. If the car got repossessed, how would they take Lily to school? How would Mark get to interviews? She begged, promising it was temporary. I was sitting in my apartment at the time, surrounded by boxes I still had not unpacked from leaving my husband, staring at bills of my own. But when she said Lily's name, my resolve broke. I transferred $800 that night. Just this once, I whispered to myself. But it was not once. The next month came another call. Their rent was overdue. Could I cover half? Vanessa promised to pay me back as soon as Mark found stable work. I pulled money from my savings and wired it to her. Then came preschool tuition, then utilities, then unexpected medical bills. The pattern formed quickly, and before long, I was sending money every month without even waiting for her to ask. I convinced myself I was doing it for Lily, for family, for peace. But as months turned into years, the numbers piled up. 800 became 1,600. 1,600 became tens of thousands. I had spreadsheets tucked away in hidden folders, records of every transfer, each one a quiet testament to my desperation to be a good sister, to hold together a bond that had never been equal. What twisted the knife deeper was how Vanessa treated me during those years. When she spoke of vacations, when she posted photos of new handbags, when she bragged about Lily's private lessons, she never mentioned me. She never hinted that behind the glossy images was my money, my sacrifices. To my parents, Vanessa was still the successful daughter. I was still the practical one, invisible. Sitting there in the living room, the glow of the screen illuminating my tired face, I scrolled through the latest transactions. The last rent payment had gone out just 2 weeks ago. $1,500. Enough to buy Ethan a new bed, enough to cover months of groceries, enough to ease the knot in my chest that never seemed to loosen. And yet, I had handed it over because Vanessa had asked, because I had believed that helping her meant keeping the family intact. Tonight, watching her daughter stomp on my gift and spit out those cruel words, I understood the truth. My generosity had not earned me gratitude. It had purchased my humiliation. They saw me as a resource, not a sister. They saw my silence as weakness, not grace. I thought of Ethan again, of the way his voice trembled when he asked if what Lily said was true. He did not know the numbers on the screen. He did not know how much I had given. But he had seen the result. His mother shamed his family complicit. And if I kept this up, if I continued bleeding myself dry to prop up Vanessa's lifestyle, what lesson would I be teaching him that love meant exploitation, that silence was survival, that cruelty could be bought with compliance? I closed the laptop with a snap and sat back, the decision settling into me like a stone sinking into water. For years, I had told myself I could not stop because it would hurt the children, because it would divide the family, because it was the right thing to do. But the truth was sharper. Stopping would not destroy the family. The family had already destroyed itself. I pressed my palms against my face and whispered into the empty room, "No more." The words felt foreign on my tongue, but powerful. For the first time in years, I felt the faintest spark of control. They thought they could humiliate me and still keep my money. They were wrong. Tomorrow, when the auto payments came due, they would find out just how wrong. The next morning, I logged into my banking app before I even made coffee. The screen lit up with the usual reminders: scheduled transfers, auto payments, due dates. For once, instead of feeling the familiar weight of obligation, I felt clarity. My fingers hovered for a moment, then moved steadily. Cancel, cancel, cancel. The rent payment to Vanessa's landlord gone. The car loan autopay linked to her account terminated. The preschool tuition draft that had somehow become my monthly burden erased. With 3 clicks, years of silent sacrifice evaporated. I closed the app and sat back, my hands trembling not from fear, but from something closer to freedom. By mid-morning, the storm began. Vanessa's first text came at 9:12 a.m. "Hey, did the rent payment bounce? Can you check?" I ignored it. At 9:25 a.m. Another. "The landlord is saying nothing came through. Please fix this ASAP." At 9:40, her tone shifted. "What's going on, Rachel? You know we can't afford to miss rent. Don't do this." Still, I stayed silent. By lunchtime, the calls started. 6 missed calls in a row, then voicemails full of escalating emotions. The first sounded confused, the second irritated, the third edged into fury. In one, she hissed, "You think you're punishing me, but you're really punishing Lily. Is that what you want? To see your niece suffer?" I gripped my phone tighter, forcing myself not to answer. By late afternoon, she brought Mark into the act. He sent a blunt message. "You're being selfish. Family helps family. If you don't send the payment by tonight, you'll regret it." That night, after I tucked Ethan into bed, I sat in the quiet living room, scrolling through the barrage of texts. Each one read like a performance flipping between guilt, anger, and manipulation. But not once did Vanessa apologize for what happened at Thanksgiving. Not once did she acknowledge the smashed gift, the cruel words, the silence at the table. To her, that humiliation had no weight. What mattered was the money. On the third day, the retaliation turned physical. I walked outside to drive Ethan to school and froze. A jagged scratch ran the length of my car from the front bumper across both doors to the rear panel. The kind of mark that required deliberate pressure, a slow hand dragging a key across the paint. My stomach dropped. On the windshield, a perfect starburst crack bloomed in the center, right where my eyes would land when driving. I stood there in the cold morning air staring at the damage. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it had happened overnight, maybe it was random vandalism. But deep down, I knew this was not chance. This was a message. My hands shook as I buckled Ethan into the passenger seat of my backup car, an old sedan I barely drove. He looked at the damaged vehicle and asked softly, "What happened, Mom?" I forced calm into my voice. "Someone wasn't very kind," I said. He frowned but didn't press. At work that day, I could barely focus on numbers. My mind replayed the scratches, the crack, the texts. The escalation was undeniable. Vanessa was angry, and her anger had turned to action. That evening, another voicemail landed Vanessa's voice low and sharp. "If you think you can cut us off and walk away, you're wrong. We've had a rough year, Rachel. You've always helped before. Why change now? You know what's at stake. You'll regret this." The veiled threat coiled in my chest. For years, I had kept the peace by staying quiet, by giving until I had nothing left. But their retaliation showed me something new. It was never about family. It was about control. And now that control was slipping from their hands. I sat at the kitchen table long after Ethan had fallen asleep, the house silent except for the hum of the fridge. The smell of cinnamon from yesterday's candle lingered faintly in the air. I replayed the Thanksgiving scene in my head, Lily's voice echoing Vanessa's smirk, my parents' silence. And then I saw the scratches on my car, deliberate, personal, impossible to ignore. That was the moment the line hardened inside me. They thought they could scare me back into submission, but they had underestimated what a mother would do when her child's safety was threatened. Fear no longer chained me. Anger, resolve, and a fierce need to protect Ethan began to take its place. That night, long after Ethan was asleep, I dialed the number I had been avoiding for months. Megan and I had been friends since college, back when life was simpler and our biggest worry was passing accounting exams. She had gone to law school, built a career in family and civil law, and always told me to call her if I ever needed help. I never did until now. My voice shook when she answered. "It's me," I whispered. "I think Vanessa keyed my car. And there's more. Too much more." Megan didn't waste time with small talk. "Start from the beginning," she said. So I told her. About Thanksgiving dinner, about Lily smashing the gift and shouting the words her mother had planted, about the years of secret financial support, the rent and car payments, the tuition, about canceling it all and the tidal wave of rage that followed, about the scratches on my car, the starburst crack in the windshield. My voice faltered when I mentioned Ethan, how he had seen it all, how he had asked if Lily's words were true. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Megan's voice came back steady and firm. "Rachel, you need to set boundaries, not just emotional ones, legal ones. Document everything, every text, every voicemail, every dollar you've sent them. Take photos of the car damage, save the repair estimates. This isn't family drama anymore. This is harassment." I swallowed hard. But pressing charges, filing reports? It feels permanent. Once I do that, there's no going back. "And if you don't," she countered, "what lesson does Ethan learn if he sees you let this continue? Silence doesn't protect him, Rachel. Action does." Her words cut deep because I knew she was right. For years I had believed that endurance was strength, that swallowing pain for the sake of peace was noble. But Ethan deserved more than a mother who endured. He deserved a mother who fought back. Megan's tone softened. "I'll help you. We'll start small. Keep everything documented. If they push further, we go to the police. You're not alone in this anymore." I sat in the quiet kitchen, the glow of the phone lighting my face, tears spilling silently down my cheeks. Not from weakness, but from the sudden relief of being heard, of being believed. For the first time since Thanksgiving night, I felt a sliver of hope. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "Thank me when this ends with you and Ethan safe, and Vanessa finally facing consequences." After the call ended, I gathered the scattered papers from my desk drawer, receipts, bank statements, old texts, and started a folder. Each piece of evidence was a fragment of the truth I had been too afraid to expose. Tonight, with Megan's voice still echoing in my ear, I realized that the truth was my only way out. 2 days later, as I was organizing receipts and screenshots into the folder Megan had told me to keep, a memory came rushing back so vivid it made me sit up straight. At Thanksgiving dinner, when Lily stomped on my gift, I had noticed a small red light blinking near the patio door. My parents had installed security cameras last year after a string of break-ins in the neighborhood. I remembered thinking at the time how odd it felt to be watched even inside the house. Now the thought of those cameras made my pulse quicken. If they had been recording, then everything Lily's tantrum, Vanessa's smirk, the silence of my parents would be preserved. I called my father that afternoon. He answered gruffly, as if still annoyed by the tension I had left behind at Thanksgiving. "What is it, Rachel?" I forced calm into my voice. "Dad, I just remembered. The security system doesn't keep recordings from Thanksgiving night." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Why do you need that?" "Because something happened and I need to see it again," I replied firmly. Another pause. Then, reluctantly, he said, "Talk to the manager. The system's cloud-based. He can get you the files." An hour later, after a polite but curious conversation with the neighborhood security contractor, a link arrived in my inbox. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. The footage opened to the dining room from a wide angle. I saw myself sitting at the table, Ethan beside me, Vanessa across Lily fidgeting in her chair. The recording had no sound at first, only the grainy hum of surveillance. Then came the moment. Lily leapt up, yanked the box from my hands, banged it against the table, and hurled it to the floor. The camera caught the silk scarf tumbling out the cranberry sauce, splattering Lily, stomping with all her small might. The audio was faint, but enough to catch her words. "Mom said you don't deserve nice things." My heart clenched, hearing it again, this time stripped of the chaos of the room, reduced to cold evidence. The camera also caught Vanessa throwing her head back in laughter, her wine glass tilting dangerously as she clutched her stomach. Mark sat stone-faced. My parents looked frozen. No one moved to stop it. No one told Lily to apologize. I closed the laptop, bile rising in my throat. This was not just memory anymore. This was proof. Proof that I was not exaggerating. Proof that Ethan had not misheard. Proof that Vanessa had weaponized her child in front of the whole family. I forwarded the clip to Megan with a single line. "You need to see this." Her response came minutes later. "This changes everything. Save multiple copies. Don't let them know you have it yet. And Rachel, this is not just humiliation. This is evidence of a pattern. We're building a case." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The weight of years pressed down on me, but for the first time I felt it shift. For so long, the gaslighting silence of my family had made me question my own perception. Maybe I was too sensitive, maybe I was overreacting, but the camera did not lie. The camera saw what I saw. The camera heard what I heard. And soon the world would too. The following week, just as I was beginning to feel a shred of stability from organizing the evidence, the school called. The voice on the other end was the secretary from Ethan's elementary. Her tone was calm, but edged with caution. "Mrs. Morgan, I wanted to let you know we had a call this morning from someone claiming to be you. They asked what time Ethan is usually picked up and who's authorized to sign him out. It didn't feel right, so we didn't give them any information. We flagged the call. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grip the counter to keep from falling. What do you mean, someone claiming to be me? The caller said she was Rachel Morgan, the secretary continued. But the number didn't match what we have on file. It was a local area code, but not yours. We recorded the call for safety purposes. Would you like me to send it to you?" My voice cracked. "Yes, please. Immediately." Within minutes, the audio file arrived in my inbox. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, my palms sweaty, my heart hammering. I clicked play. A woman's voice floated through the speakers, high-pitched, falsely cheerful, the kind of tone dripping with forced sweetness. "Hi, this is Rachel Morgan, Ethan's mom. I just wanted to check what time he usually gets picked up and who's allowed to sign him out. I forgot what I put down and I want to make sure everything is in order." My breath caught. The cadence, the breathy lilt at the end of her sentences, the way she stretched certain words, it was Vanessa. She hadn't even tried to disguise herself much. She thought she could fool strangers, but I knew that voice as well as my own. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse racing with fury and terror. It was no longer about money or humiliation. This was about Ethan's safety. My son, my little boy who still carried a stuffed bear to bed and whispered to me when he was scared of thunderstorms. And now his aunt had tried to trick the school into giving her information about him. I called Megan immediately, my voice shaking as I explained. She didn't hesitate. Forward me the file. Tonight. Don't wait until morning. This is impersonation with malicious intent, and it directly involves a minor. Rachel, this is serious. We're going to the police. I sat there staring at Ethan's drawings taped to the fridge, the crayon scribbles of dinosaurs and spaceships, and felt a surge of resolve. They could humiliate me. They could scratch my car. They could laugh in my face and spread lies to my parents. But coming after my child crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I forwarded the recording to Megan and then walked down the hall to peek into Ethan's room. He was curled beneath his blanket, his chest rising and falling steadily in sleep. I whispered into the dark more to myself than to him. I will never let them touch you. In that moment, I understood something with crystal clarity. I was no longer just reacting. I was going to fight. 2 days later, folder in hand, I drove back to my parents' house. My chest felt like a drumbeat, every thud loud and heavy. The streets were bare, the last of the autumn leaves blowing across the pavement. I parked at the curb, sat for a long minute in the car, and whispered to myself, no more silence. Ethan was at a playdate with a classmate safe, which gave me the strength to step into enemy territory alone. The house smelled the same as always, roasted coffee and lemon polish, but everything felt tainted. My mother opened the door, her expression stiff, almost wary. Rachel, she said, voice clipped. They're here. They turned out to be Vanessa and Mark sitting in the living room as though it were a courtroom and they were waiting for the judge to arrive. Vanessa's arms were crossed, her mouth twisted in that familiar smirk. Mark avoided my eyes, staring instead at the patterned rug. My father sat in his recliner, lips pressed tight. For a moment, no one spoke. I set the folder down on the coffee table with a deliberate thud. We're going to talk, I said. My voice surprised me, low, steady, louder than I expected. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Talk about what? That you're punishing us, that you cut us off for no reason. No reason, I snapped, heat rising in my chest. Thanksgiving. Lily smashing my gift, shouting that I don't deserve nice things. Where would she learn that? Vanessa shrugged. Kids repeat things. Maybe you're too sensitive. I reached into the folder and pulled out the printed screenshots of her texts, the demands, the insults, the threats. I laid them one by one on the table. Too sensitive or too used. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother murmured, Rachel, maybe this isn't the way. I cut her off. Don't you dare tell me this isn't the way. You've watched her tear me down since we were kids. You've stayed silent every time. Your silence is betrayal. Then I pulled out the USB drive I'd brought, plugged it into their TV. The footage from Thanksgiving flickered onto the screen, the wide angle showing Lily snatching the box, smashing it, shouting the line, and Vanessa throwing her head back in laughter. The room fell silent, except for the faint sound of that cruel voice, Mom said you don't deserve nice things. My mother covered her mouth. My father stared at the floor. Mark shifted uneasily. Vanessa's face hardened. So what? It's just a kid acting out. You're blowing this out of proportion. I let the footage loop once, then yanked the drive out. This is not a kid acting out. This is you using your daughter as a weapon, and it doesn't end there. I pulled out my phone, played the voicemail from Ethan's school. The secretary's voice introducing the call, then Vanessa's thinly disguised imitation of mine, asking about pickup times. The room froze. My mother's eyes widened. My father finally looked at Vanessa. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. That was you. Don't bother denying it. Your tone, your cadence, it's unmistakable. You tried to get information about my son, about where he would be when he'd be alone. Mark finally spoke, his voice strained. Vanessa, you didn't. I didn't. She snapped back, but her voice cracked. Her cheeks flushed red, and I knew she realized the denial was useless. I turned to my parents. This is the family you keep protecting, the daughter you keep defending. She used her child to humiliate me. She keyed my car. She impersonated me to Ethan's school. And you, my voice broke, but I forced it steady again. You stayed silent. My father whispered, Rachel, maybe we can settle this privately. We don't need police involved. We're family. Family! I barked out a bitter laugh. Family doesn't destroy each other's lives and then demand more money. Family doesn't endanger a 6-year-old boy. Family doesn't stand by in silence while one daughter rips the other apart. The room was heavy with my words. My mother's hands shook. My father looked old, smaller than I'd ever seen him. Vanessa's smirk was gone, replaced by something darker rage mixed with fear. I gathered the papers back into the folder, snapped it shut. I'm done. This ends tonight. I won't bankroll your life. I won't stay quiet while you poison mine. And I will not let Ethan grow up thinking this is normal. Vanessa lunged forward, her voice sharp. You think you're better than us. You think you can cut us off and walk away. You'll regret this. I looked her in the eye. No, you'll regret it. Then I stood, walked to the door, and left. Behind me, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was final. As I drove away, the folder on the seat beside me, I felt something shift inside. I was no longer the quiet, invisible sister. I was the one holding the truth and soon the law. The following morning, I sat across from Megan in her office, the folder of evidence between us. Her desk was stacked with case files, the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. She flipped through the pages. I had brought screenshots of text messages, printouts of bank transfers, still images from the security footage, and finally, the transcript of the call to Ethan's school. Her eyes sharpened as she read. Rachel, she said, her voice measured, this isn't just family conflict anymore. This is harassment, financial exploitation, property damage, and attempted impersonation involving a minor. We can file a restraining order immediately. We can also press for a criminal investigation. The words made my stomach twist, but at the same time, I felt relief. For the first time, someone was framing my pain in legal terms, not just emotional ones. It wasn't just my word against Vanessa's cruelty. It was documented, provable. What happens first? I asked. We'll file for an emergency protective order, Megan explained. That will bar her from contacting you or Ethan and from coming within 200 feet of his school. Then I'll help you file a police report with all of this evidence. Once it's in the system, the case moves forward whether she likes it or not. I signed the forms with a shaking hand, each stroke of the pen feeling like carving a line in stone. Permanent. Necessary. By the afternoon, Megan had filed the paperwork electronically, and I received confirmation an emergency restraining order had been granted. My phone buzzed with an email from the county court, the official document stamped and sealed. Reading my name on it alongside Ethan's filled me with both dread and protection. That evening, 2 uniformed officers arrived at my door. One was young, his posture stiff with professionalism. The other, a woman with kind eyes, explained they were there to take my statement and collect the digital files. I led them to the kitchen table where the folder lay open. They plugged in a flash drive and transferred the security footage, the audio recording from the school, the photos of my car. They listened carefully, occasionally nodding, occasionally exchanging glances that told me this was more serious than even I had realized. When I finished recounting everything, the female officer asked gently, Do you believe your sister poses a threat to your son? Yes, I said without hesitation. She already tried. She won't stop unless someone makes her. The officer slid a card across the table. We'll be in touch. You did the right thing coming forward. We'll add this to an open file on her, and once the DA reviews it, charges can be filed. After they left, I sat with the card in my hand, the weight of the badge emblem pressed into the paper. For years, I had been invisible, my pain minimized by silence and excuses. Now it was written down, logged, assigned a case number. My voice had been entered into the record. That night when I tucked Ethan into bed, I told him simply, You're safe. I made sure of it. He looked up at me, his eyes wide but trusting, and whispered, Promise. I promise, I said, and for the first time I knew it was true. The fallout arrived faster than I expected. By the end of the week, word had spread through the family grapevine that I had filed official papers. My mother called first, her voice tight, almost frantic. Rachel, tell me it isn't true. Tell me you didn't really file something against your sister. She said the police showed up at her door. I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, staring at the ceiling. It is true, I said evenly. I had no choice. She keyed my car, impersonated me with Ethan's school, and used Lily to humiliate me in front of all of you. I won't pretend anymore." There was silence, then a shaky sigh. I didn't think you'd go this far. Families don't take each other to court." My laugh was bitter. Families also don't endanger a 6-year-old boy. But she did. The next day, my father called. His tone was quieter, wearier. "Rachel, maybe you could reconsider. You've always been the level-headed one. Can't you let this go? Think of your mother. Think of the holidays." I clenched my jaw. "I am thinking of the holidays, Dad. I'm thinking of the night when Lily stomped on my gift and screamed words her mother taught her. I'm thinking of the silence from both of you. I'm done carrying this." He exhaled heavily, then muttered, "I hope you know what you're doing." Meanwhile, Vanessa unleashed her rage on social media. A post appeared on her Facebook page the following Sunday, dripping with dramatics. "Some people pretend to be family until you stop handing them money. Then they show their true colors and try to ruin your life." Her friends flooded the comments with sympathy. "Stay strong," Mama One wrote. "You and your kids don't need that negativity." Another chimed in, "Cut toxic people out, even if they're blood." I didn't respond, but Megan did. A single comment from her professional account. "Careful with your words. Evidence speaks louder than posts." The next morning, I received a message from Ethan's school principal. Vanessa had been informed of the restraining order and she was officially barred from stepping on school property. "Your son is safe here," the principal assured me. "We've flagged every file. No one but you or your listed contacts can pick him up." Relief washed over me, mingled with sorrow that it had come to this. Later that week, Megan called with an update. "The DA's office is reviewing the impersonation and property damage charges. The restraining order is active, and if she violates it, she'll be arrested on the spot. Stay alert, but know you've got the law on your side now." That night, I sat on the couch with Ethan curled beside me, his head on my shoulder. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. No footsteps on the driveway, no scratches on the car. For the first time in years, I felt something like safety. Vanessa's world was starting to unravel, and for once, I wasn't the one holding it together. By spring, the pieces had fallen into place. Vanessa was no longer the untouchable golden child my parents had built her up to be. She now carried the weight of charges. Destruction of property, harassment, unlawful impersonation, all of them filed and moving slowly but steadily through the court system. When she stood in front of the judge for her arraignment, Megan came with me, a steady presence at my side. I didn't need to speak. The evidence spoke for me, the camera footage, the school call recording the texts, the photos of my car. Vanessa pled not guilty, of course, but her smirk had vanished. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. My parents didn't sit beside her. They stayed home, caught between their daughters, still hoping to pretend neutrality was wisdom. I stopped asking them for support. Silence was their choice, and I had made mine. The financial consequences hit Vanessa and Mark hard. Without my quiet payments, their rent slipped into arrears. Their landlord began eviction proceedings. The kids were pulled from their private school and enrolled in the local public one. My mother complained to me once on the phone that the children shouldn't suffer for adult mistakes. I answered calmly. They were suffering long before watching their mother teach them cruelty. It was the first time she didn't argue back. As for me, something shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. I canceled the second job I had been working on weekends just to cover the support I funneled to Vanessa. That money now went to Ethan's future. I opened a savings account in his name, the balance growing slowly but steadily. I fixed the scratches on my car, not to erase the reminder, but to show myself that broken things could be restored. Ethan changed too. He asked fewer questions about his aunt and grandparents as the months passed. He saw me stand tall, saw me protect him, and I think he understood in his own way that family wasn't about blood, but about safety. One night, as I tucked him in, he whispered, "I'm glad it's just us. Mom, we're enough." I kissed his forehead, tears burning my eyes, and said, "We always were." The restraining order stayed in place, renewed after the first hearing. Megan helped me file for long-term protection. Knowing that paper existed backed by the law, not just my hope, lifted a weight I hadn't realized I carried for years. I never returned to Thanksgiving at my parents' house. Instead, that November, Ethan and I drove out to a cabin in the mountains. We cooked a small turkey, played board games by the fire, and let the snow fall outside. No insults, no silence, just laughter, peace, and freedom. Sometimes late at night, I still think of the girl I used to be, the one who sent rent money in secret, who swallowed humiliation for the sake of belonging. I grieve for her, but I also thank her. She survived long enough to give me the chance to fight back. Family betrayal cut me open, but setting boundaries stitched me back together. Justice didn't erase the scars, but it gave me something more valuable: the knowledge that I could stand my ground even when those I loved most turned against me. As I watched Ethan run across the snowy yard, that Thanksgiving cheeks flushed with joy, I realized I no longer felt like I was losing. I had finally stopped surrendering, and that was enough.